dangerous environment.
The toxin inside the dumping site is very strong. I know two of them who has the bad breathing. There is a mother who had born two twins with asthma, and the doctor referred him that is the toxin from dumping when he was pregnant. There is some toxin they breathe.
We have so many people who are affected by the environment we have. So many who have suffered miscarriages, many of them with asthma, respiratory problems, problems in breathing. We have so many of them here. We are working in an environment whereby we don't have toilets. We don't have toilets in the dump site. People go in bushes. When it rains, there are a lot of swamps and waters whereby we can have waterborne diseases like cholera, typhoid.
The most effective people is the women. You can see there is a woman who can not afford the money for the food, not afford the money for the hospital, cannot afford the money for the, like I can see the sanitary towels ending month. So they use the medicine in the landfill and they collect the expired sanitary in the landfill to use them at home, even their children.
Plastic pollution is a crisis to the entire world, and we are the key players. We should consider as people who need to be consulted in decision making. They are workers as any other workers, and they contribute also in making the environment clean. They contribute in the economy of the world, and they should be seen.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Our second session is titled AI and Digital Tech, How Can the Global South Benefit Equally? The session will be moderated by Dr. Samir Patel, the Director of Center for Security, Strategy, and Technology at Observer Research Foundation. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Samir.
Thank you so much. And we have gathered here today to discuss a very important topic, as the moderator mentioned, AI and digital tech. How can the global south benefit equally? We have a very fantastic lineup of speakers and discussants from all parts of the world. We have Ambassador, His Excellency Bitange Ndemo, Ambassador of Kenya to Belgium and the European Union. And he's also the chairman of the Kenya Distributed Ledgers and Artificial Intelligence Task Force. And we have another speaker, Erika Sheng, who is the General Counsel and Executive Vice President of Compliance at Worldwide Technology. But before I give floor to both the speakers, let me offer some initial thoughts on the subject. Artificial intelligence, as you know, stands at the forefront of technological innovation, poised to reshape our world in ways which are both vast as well as complex. But as we venture into the 21st century, we have seen the potential to transform of AI nearly every aspect of human life. And that is, we have already seen, we have, for instance, seen the ChatGPT, we have seen how, AI is transforming healthcare, scientific research, and even creative economy. So AI is indeed ushering a new era of possibilities, but also challenges. What we are seeing now is that the economic divide that we had used to see earlier in the 1970s and 80s between the developed world and the developing world is now evolving into an AI divide. It is basically dividing the global north and the global south. And there are 5 ways in which this is happening. The first is the uneven development and adoption. AI technologies are being developed and adopted more rapidly in the global north countries, which generally have more advanced tech infrastructure and greater financial resources, whereas many countries in the global south lag behind in AI research, development, implementation because of limited funding, infrastructure, and tech expertise. The second way in which this divide is manifesting is data and algorithmic bias. AI systems are often trained on data sets which are primarily from the global north populations, which can lead to bias and reduce effectiveness when applied to the context in the global south. And this data imbalance can perpetuate, and we have already seen the examples of this, into amplifying the existing inequalities. The third is the economic impact. AI indeed has the potential to boost economic growth, but the benefits may disproportionately accrue to the global north countries and companies. And there are concerns about job displacement in the global south, particularly in the sectors such as manufacturing and services, which have been traditionally the providers of employment opportunities. The fourth is brain drain. And we are seeing here in terms of that the concentration of AI research and development in the global north countries can lead to brain drain as talented individuals from the global south relocate to the global north for better opportunities. And finally, AI governance and ethics. Global south countries often have less influence in shaping international AI policies and ethical guidelines, which may not adequately address their specific concerns and contexts. While there are some who argue that AI could allow global south countries to leapfrog certain stages of tech development, just as the way, for instance, the mobile phones allowed some countries to bypass the traditional stages of technology development as well as economic development, for the I think it will take indeed a collaborative effort between the global north and the global south to make that a reality. And this is particularly true for the capacity building and education. So with that, let me hand over the floor to our first speaker, His Excellency Ambassador Endemo. Ambassador, so glad to see you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to convene this program, which addresses issues that concern us as we begin to think as to how we can benefit from these emerging technologies. Indeed, AI is going to be very critical in terms of development, especially in developing countries. But the fear that, as you said clearly, it is the disparity, which arise from several factors that include differences in infrastructure investment, education, in terms of capacity building, and sometimes policy support, because many of the developing countries have looked up to other countries before they develop their policies. You can see, for example, with the data, a lot of countries came to talk about data protection after the GDPR. The global north, with its advanced technological systems and robust funding mechanisms, which most of the case are not available in the south, as high level of literacy, for example, than we do in the developing countries. And it's actually well positioned to harness the power of AI when you compare with us in the south, in the global south, where we often grapple with inadequate resources, limited access to quality education, and infrastructural challenges which hinder our ability to compete on an equal footing. I hope we don't take it as it's been happening before, where we don't make every effort to get into these technologies. Personally, I argue that AI is a gift to Global South because of the many benefits that that I see. For example, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, we can deal with them much more effectively with AI and data. Look at, for example, productivity of the farmers. We could leverage AI, develop chatbots, because there is the cost of having extension officers proved to be very expensive. We can use data to make predictions around weather, predictions around um, uh, where we can, the consumption patterns and other things, so that we can make our farmers uh, more they can be able to utilize what they produce more effectively than previously. It is true that AI development implies not just leveling the technological playing field, but it also ensures that AI technologies are accessible, affordable, beneficial to all. This involves we may begin to democratize access to AI tools and education, fostering inclusive innovation, and creating policies that encourage equitable AI adoption and development. Sometimes the global south takes a lot longer to begin to think about regulation, to begin to talk about putting in new policies. But because we have had so much experience coming from behind, I think that's why you see now there is a lot of people working towards developing capacity, even though we are lying behind, putting up infrastructure, which has been a huge hindrance. So to bridge the gap that we have, global north and global south, it requires a multidimensional approach in terms of investments in digital infrastructure, education, which are critical towards success, alongside fostering international collaborations that prioritizes knowledge and technology transfer to under-resourced regions. Additionally, ethical AI practices. The good thing is that the West or the North did well at the beginning of AI. I remember participating in terms of developing AI principles, which you require ahead of time, because when you have guardrail, then you know that things may move forward in a better way. And that kind of collaboration has helped some countries to leapfrog, and we need to see more countries take advantage of that space. Ultimately, achieving equality in AI development hinges on global cooperation, where the strengths of the global north can be leveraged to uplift and empower the global south, fostering more inclusive and equitable AI landscape for all. Let me stop here. I probably come back to you again.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for those really good insights. I think what we spoke about, not just the disparity in terms of the leveling of the playing field, but also in terms of the access. And secondly, in terms of the regulation, how Global South takes some time, but also because we have our historical experiences to reflect on when it comes to some of these emerging technologies. Thank you so much. Let me turn to Erica from the Worldwide Technology to offer her insights. Erica.
Sure. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to participate in this very, I think, important discussion around AI. You know, we find ourselves at an amazing technological crossroads, right? This is probably the biggest technology revolution that we will see in our generations. And really, if you think about it, it's analogous in my view to the Industrial Revolution of many, the last century, right? This is truly going to change. It has an extraordinary potential to change the way we live, the way we work, even the way we entertain ourselves or engage with one another socially. So I think there's a tremendous responsibility that has been placed on all of us to think about not only the power, but the impact that it will have as we, need to continue to embrace the innovation. And with that comes a desire to move with speed to reap those benefits. We also need to make sure that we're not moving too fast and that we slow down just a little bit in order to speed up, right? In the long term, to make sure that what we're putting into place is sustainable, that it's equitable, and that it really truly does move us all forward in the ways that we expect. I also think that I would point out that one thing I think we cannot forget in this discussion is that we're also facing this amazing technological revolution, which will require a tremendous amount of power at a time when we are also thinking about globally the effects of climate change. We are thinking about how we create a sustainable environment in that regard as well. And these two things sit a little bit in contrast to one another, right? If you think about the tremendous computing power that we're talking about and how much energy that's going to need to consume while we're faced with decisions as to how we come up with that energy. So I think when we think about as well with the global South, climate change affects the whole planet, right? But we all know that there are a number of nations, particularly in the global South, that have been particularly impacted by climate change in recent years, rising sea levels, et cetera, right? We want to make sure that as we're thinking about this, that we're taking those points into consideration, that we are thinking about how we are setting up our power, how we are allocating our resources and doing so responsibly. So I think that is a lens that we simply need to always keep in mind as we move forward. The global South is a diverse set of cultures, ethnicities, and obviously political systems. So it will be very important for us to think about the needs of those communities as we are thinking about the development of AI and the tremendous power that it could impact. Dr. Patil, you mentioned, for example, the labor force, right? And that's something that we do need to think about. We need to think about when we're enabling these technologies, what is the desired outcome in each location? What are the needs and the priorities of the different locations? The way in which we roll out AI, in order to be equitable, doesn't mean it needs to be the same. It may be that we need to roll things out differently in different locations because their needs are different. We always need to be thinking the only reason to use AI is because it is propelling your needs forward. So just as it wouldn't have done any good to show up with an automobile in the 1800s in a remote village where there's no gas stations, people don't know how to drive, there's no roads, right? That wouldn't have done them any good. Similarly, we can't show up with a bunch of fancy AI tools in the middle of an environment where there isn't any infrastructure or interest or education or need for whatever that is. So we have to think about AI not as a singular item, but as a collection of opportunities. And those opportunities may be taken differently in different stages, in different timelines, in different locations, yet still be advancing each country in a way that is the most beneficial to them. So I think that to me, that is the most important thing that we should be looking at as we're looking at the development and the rollout of AI. So with that, I guess I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Patel.
Thank you so much, Erika. I think the two contexts that you identified, one is the context in which the AI changes are happening, which is that we are also beset with the other global challenges, such as you mentioned, the climate change. And the other context being that the deployment of AI tools, within the global South also has to be very mindful of the context in which it is operating. That there has to be a necessary infrastructure in place so that we can harness really the power and the transformative potential of AI. Thank you so much, Ambassador and Erica, for sharing your initial thoughts. Since we are already running behind the schedule, what I will do is that we will now go to our discussions from the civil society organizations, and I will give them the floor for 4 minutes each to explain their perspective, but also in response to what you have just said. So we have first Mark Mananthan, Director of Cybersecurity and Critical Technologies, Pan Pacific Forum. Mark, the floor is for you.
Thank you so much, Samir. It's great to see you, and thank you to the organizers for the very kind invitation to participate in this Global Town Hall 2024. And aloha to all our virtual audience who are tuning in different parts of the world. I think we are off to a great start with those remarks from the previous speakers, and I will attempt in the next 4 minutes to discuss the nexus of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity and its implications to Southeast Asia in implementing its newly minted ASEAN AI guidelines and its implications, of course, within and beyond the region. And so for the past few years, the region or Southeast Asia's digital economy has been growing rapidly. Its internet economy is projected to reach $360 billion by 2025. And a key asset to the region's economic development, of course, is the role of AI-enabled technologies and platforms. And the release of various national AI strategies and roadmaps underlines the region's excitement toward artificial intelligence. But aside from the positive benefits of artificial intelligence, leaders, policymakers, academic experts, and civil society advocates have been increasingly aware of the acute harms and risks of AI. And so the ASEAN Secretariat has released the ASEAN AI Guidelines. It's a set of non-binding voluntary principles and guidelines that will guide sort of the design, the development, and the deployment of AI technologies. But upon the release of the guidelines, I think many ask the question, what's next? And so I would argue that for AI guidelines in this particular region, and I think elsewhere in other jurisdictions, to truly achieve their stated outcomes, it is imperative that nation states, particularly in Global South, continue to have their eyes on the prize in raising cyber resiliency and capacity. Cybersecurity and artificial intelligence have a very mutually reinforcing relationship. It is difficult to discuss AI without cyberspace because cyberspace is the fundamental architecture upon which AI technologies are built upon. And so because of this mutual relationship, AI and cybersecurity could be resilient and vulnerable at the same time. AI functions are not independent from the technical parameters and the normative values that shape the behavior in the cyber domain. And in Southeast Asia, this could not be more very, very pressing as the region is increasingly poised to become a digital economic powerhouse. Malicious cyber actors have also been capitalizing on the rapid digital transformation. And we've seen the recent attack on Indonesia's national data center that has created a massive disruption. That is only a preview of the things that malicious actors can do with increasingly offensive or infused cyber capabilities with the use of artificial intelligence. And so I would argue that as a way forward, discussions like the Global Town Hall provides us an opportunity for peer-to-peer learning where experts and colleagues from various parts of the world can share best practices and lessons learned on the evolving approaches to AI regulations and cybersecurity. While often in the Global South, particularly in Southeast Asia, they look to the Global North as the ideal model for cyber resiliency, it is also important to share notes among peers in the Global South due to the shared digital maturity and context. Lastly, as Southeast Asia engaged in peer-to-peer learning among its colleagues in the Global North or Global South, it is important to also step back and reframe our current conversations beyond economic development. I would argue that to truly bridge the practice and policy gap, whether in AI regulations or cybersecurity, it is imperative to adapt a more relational and community-driven approaches to developing and deploying technologies that emphasize inclusion and sustainability. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share the virtual stage with all of you, and I am very much looking forward to the open discussions.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I think that relationship that you brought out between cybersecurity and AI, I think is really important because we have already seen how, for instance, there was already a gap in terms of the cybersecurity preparedness of the global south as compared to the global north, but also in terms of, again, the governance. I think, the global south again had not that much voice when it came to the regulations concerning cybersecurity. So I think, it's important that we also link those two issues together and see how we can make further progress. Thank you so much, Mark. Let me now invite Christina Kausch. She is the Deputy Director of South at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Christina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patel. And I would also like to thank the organizers for having me to participate in this terrific discussion of which I think is a really great initiative of which we should have much more. I would like to say a few words about the geopolitical and geoeconomic implications of the AI discussion. But before I do so, I would like to pick up the point of the apparent north-south gap that you mentioned in your introduction, Dr. Patel. I think there is, of course, as you rightly mentioned, the gap in AI readiness between North and South. However, I do think that there is also there are other kinds of gaps. There is a policy gap. There is also a perceptions gap. For example, when the European Union has discussions with its southern partners that are very keen on having greater levels of cooperation on AI and want help from the North, from the European Union in this case, to develop the AI capacities. Often you have this gap that the southern partners focus in particular more on the development and growth elements, opportunities, benefits of AI, whereas in the North, there's a much more risk-based approach. There's much more emphasis, well, not much more, but also emphasis on the risk, in particular when dealing with authoritarian countries, the concern that greater AI uptake by governments might help to entrench authoritarian governance through AI-based surveillance and other solutions. So I think that what we denominate often as a north-south gap often might be, for example, a gap between open and closed societies. Sometimes it is a gap between developed and undeveloped markets, where, for example, where of course the productivity gains from AI may be greater for the former because they have more specialized workers, more the greater service sector, wider internet access, and so on. So, and I do also think that there is a north-south gap to some degree. I mean, we don't have any sort of global representative data on this, but there is a clear difference in perceptions recently in the public. Recently, I saw a poll that was comparing the attitudes of the public, how positive they were asked, how great they saw the benefits of AI for their societies, and you could see that in Europe, people were the amount of people that were enthusiastic was about 1/3, and the rest was taking more skeptic positions. And in the Persian Gulf, it was the other way around. So you do have you do have a certain divide there also on the public side. So I guess the point I'm making here is that this north-south gap that we perceive often is really more maybe also a gap between political and economic systems. On the geopolitical implications, it is clear that we are in a highly competitive geopolitical and geoeconomic environment right now. AI, it has been said many times, is a force multiplier in many ways. So hence it is for states, it's a key geopolitical asset that has the potential to change the balance of power and boost the geopolitical and geoeconomic leverage in favor of those who have now the capacities, the capital and the determination to invest heavily. There is, of course, the outsized influence of the private sector, the driver of innovation in AI. And something that's comparatively new here in history, at least to this degree, is that how private sector companies are becoming geopolitical players in their own right. Now, we know that the US and China are the only real AI superpowers, but, and that's the South dimension here, I think, what's really interesting, you have a set of geopolitical swing states of emerging non-Western AI pioneers, a group coming up that is growing, that will have a meaningful role in shaping the AI-enabled future. In the North, there are a few of them, but also in the South, I'm just naming India, of course, but also a couple of countries there's emerging new global tech center and the Persian Gulf, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, then there's, of course, Israel, there's South Korea, Singapore, and so on. So these players can gain an outsized influence when they manage to accumulate assets that are critical to the AI value chain, for example, because they have companies, well, think only about Taiwan, companies that are indispensable to their value chain. So, and I think that perhaps just to name a couple, India, of course, has been a long country that many countries in the global South look to. AI has been said by Goldman Sachs that AI could boost India's annual growth rate by 1.3 percentage point by 2035. And the emphasis is here on societal transformation and inclusive growth through AI domestically, addressing challenges such as healthcare, financial inclusion, agriculture, agri-tech, and so on. And the interesting point in the Indian case, I think, is that it perceives itself in its AI strategy as an AI garage potentially for the developing world to benefit 40% of the world. So envisioning itself as a global hub for developing scalable AI solutions that can be implemented across the developing world. And that is, of course, a very interesting prospect. On the other hand, you have countries like,
Yes. Can we come back to some of those points later? Because we have...
yes, okay, maybe just wrapping up, I think the last point I think that is really important on the geopolitical dimension of AI is that we are in this area of increasing technological decoupling between the US and China, where AI and tech middle powers get caught in the middle, and that triggers hedging dynamics in the tech domains. Yeah, the efforts to keep the doors open to both Chinese and US technology, investment value chains, and I think that is something where we will see much more friction and where which is a space to watch.
Thank you so much, Christian, and apologies for cutting you, but I think you have raised some very important points, particularly in terms of the hedging between the United States and China for the global South, and we will return to if we have the time during the discussion time. But I want to now go to our next discussant, Srivat William Shim, co-founder and president of AI Forum. And I think the fact that Mark mentioned about the community-driven approach, I think Srivat will also talk about that. Over to you, Srivat.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Samir Patil, as our moderator, and greetings to all of our distinguished panelists, guests, and organizers. Thank you for coordinating this event. So I'll get straight into the point. On the topic of AI and digital diplomacy, we should first understand, what are the differences between these terminologies that we are using, right? So we often hear digital diplomacy, cyber diplomacy. If we could, frame this for the sake of our discussion, we could refer to digital diplomacy as the use of digital technology for diplomatic activities. So, for example, using social media, using different forms of internet platforms and extensions, how we are really using them in everyday diplomatic activities, which has evolved. We could say that this is really the revolution of the communications industry or telecommunications industry. We've come a long way, and it's affecting how we interact. Therefore, it changes completely the dynamics. We could say a significant paradigm shift of how states interact with each other, bilaterally, multilaterally, and so on. When we talk about cyber diplomacy, on the other hand, we could refer to cyber diplomacy more on the actual governance of the internet, for example, or diplomacy within the cyberspace. So it is quite important to distinguish between the two terms. Moving on to the two talking points that I will be following up on. The first is the AI contribution to meeting community needs, and the second will be on public resistance. So on the first point of AI specifically, meeting community needs, I would like to frame my discussion with a rather provocative thought. There's a common saying in the field of technology in today's world, and it goes as such. The US innovates, China replicates, and EU regulates. This might be quite controversial to some, but I believe it does have some, insightfulness to it, that, the US has been leading technological revolutions for many decades, being due to their creativity, their resources in terms of talent, but I think more importantly is their regulatory sandbox, allowing for the private sector to lead in technological innovation, allowing for technologies to mature, meaning that once a technology is deployed, not just AI, but for all the iterations before that, allowing it to mature within the economy and society, to find its impact, to wait for a certain period of time, to understand what kind of implications it has in the real world, rather than coming up with theoretical concepts or obstacles that we might face in the future. This has allowed the US to be a global leader for the past decades in the field of technology. When it comes to China, replicating, by any means, I do not mean what China used to be claimed as, a copycat economy. China has become much more sophisticated since then, again, due to their government strategies, their high levels of investment in infrastructure, again, education and talent. They have really brought their technology to a new level, not only replicating or what we called copycat before, but because of their economy of scale, they are self-sufficient. I myself had the privilege to live and work in China, also compared to North America and Europe. So I can say from personal experience that by living there as a consumer of technology, as a citizen of those, or not a citizen, but at least as a visitor or resident of those countries at the time, it's quite unique the way that China's digital economy has formed. From the outside, it might seem different, but we do have to respect that mutual differences. And for small states such as Cambodia, such as other member states or countries within the global South, what we prioritize over regulation or control is deployment. We are at different stages of development, and so therefore deploying these AI technologies and other beneficial technologies at the large scale to the mass is our top priority. So timing does come into play. Another point I would like to bring up is that we are often misunderstood by using or too much referring on technology over utility in the form of a shiny object syndrome. So now that AI has become so trendy, it's become a buzzword that has cut across all verticals, all industries, sectors. We are starting to have implications, right, where we forget completely about the utility. Is AI actually solving the problem we are trying to address, or are we just trying to force AI solutions into everything? This can be evident. I think that's really happening in many areas. Moving on, when we talk about the digital divide and inequality, such as the theme of today's discussion on how can global South benefit equally with respect to the global North, this is a social science perspective. When we come from the science or technology development side, we're trying to find solutions to the problems that exist. But the inherent nature of social science is to look for problems. We look for social problems. We, pinpoint or point the finger towards, which countries are developing unequally, or within the country itself, unequal between the rural and urban. So this is more of a social science argument and can sometimes hinder the actual development of technology and its application in the economy and society. Another point, as I mentioned before, is about the timing. If
you can just wrap up.
Yes, yeah, I'll wrap up. If we are too early, regulation can become strangulation, so we have to be careful. A final analogy that I would like to leave is a common analogy from economics, is about kicking away the ladder. When we think about developed countries that have come first, the EU had their first internet connection in 1988, so about 30 years ago, or 30, 40 years ago. The rest of the global South countries only in the late 90s. So if we look at that time frame and Moore's law, that technology is developing exponentially every year, we do have to consider all their legacy technologies that came before and how they came to be the regulatory leaders in the world that they did. So this does not this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sirivat. Let me now go to Liz Orembo, who is a researcher at the Research ICT Africa, to offer her perspective. Liz.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patil. As the moderator said, my name is Liz Orembo, and I am from Research ICT Africa, a tech policy and research think tank based in Africa. So I'll begin by mentioning some of the things that the speakers have said. First, from my friend Bitangi Ndemo, that AI is a multifaceted. It brings multiple opportunities, and it also requires that we approach its development from very many angles, multiple angles. And unfortunately, the hype on AI, we've focused it on competition, country competition, community competition, when we have so much inequalities, underlying inequalities. So how we move from data hype, AI hype, and all hype, it means that global South countries, we just move from these hypes, and we are not given that opportunity to look inwards and see how AI will benefit us, and what are those underlying conditions that we should be working on to make sure that AI works for us. The thing here is that we've had some technologies come, and there's been hype that this will bring about development, leapfrog global South development itself. But as much as they've delivered, they've also not delivered to the expectations of the hype. And this is also because we've not really looked at those underlying factors, the things that we should work on to prepare ourselves for this technology. For example, connectivity. Connectivity is still so much of a subject that should be talked about in Africa, because again, AI needs people to have to be connected to the internet. People need to be connected to devices, affordability. And there are these barriers already, inequalities, underlying inequalities already, that is making people not really to access the AI technology. The results of that is that they become invisible to even data that is being used to fuel AI. Also, they are not able to use AI and advantage from it, take advantage on it the way the others are benefiting from it. So that divide, as the rest of the panelists are pointing out, is going to be much bigger, because again, research is also showing that AI is multiplying capacity. So if you're not using AI, AI is not relevant to you, then your capacity is not multiplied. But one of the successful things that we're also seeing in the Global South is not all gloomy. And as one of the speakers said, that we are also looking so much at the economic development of AI, and without looking at how AI can really impact communities, with just moving from that economic influence of it. And I'll give an example of the recent Kenyan protest, where we saw AI being used heavily in the protest, and people were using it from all corners of the country. And this is because AI can also be used to develop some of this capacity, these inequalities that we have, and these underlying things that we have. Let's say education. You can use AI in education, in agriculture, in healthcare, so that it's not like we are looking towards one underlying thing to catch AI, but you can also use AI to bridge some of these underlying things. And the thing I'm saying with this protest is that we saw things like ChatGPT being used to really crunch policy issues, so that even people in the rural area, people who are not that conversant with policy or even digital literacy, can even understand those policies and contribute to debates. The downside of it, which also showed during the protest, is that AI needs to be more transparent, More transparent also means data needs to be transparent. Access to information, access to data as information should be championed as a social good. Because again, how communities can use AI for participatory governance depends on how much data is available to them. Yeah, and the other thing.
Can I ask you to wrap up quickly?
Okay, so wrapping up, my last important point would be trust, because again, data is being generated by people. Much of data is being generated by people, and if they don't trust those people who are taking data from them and the custodians of data, then it's going to be really hard for people to generate that data and to trust people to use that data for AI. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. Let me now go to Nicholas Grossman, who is a project director for Global Index on the Responsible AI at the Global Center on AI Governance. Nicholas.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Also, thank you very much for the invitations for this so important event and opportunity to discuss these topics. Well, first of all, I would say that having heard the previous speakers, I think that with some difference, there is like a common ground of understanding on where we're at and the importance of addressing these gaps towards AI in the global side. And I wanted to use this minutes, this space to reinforce some ideas that might help us to bridge this gap regarding AI in global south and global north. And I think that it's been clear in these conversations that there are like two main topics when we talk about this gap, which one is AI for development and the other is AI governance. And I think that both of them requires a global south approach with our particularities. And I would like to share four key ideas with you, and then we can discuss them. The first of them is we need to take the initiative. We, as the Global South community, Global South countries, we need to take action. We cannot expect that other actors in the global sphere would do it for in our representation. It's something that we need to take the leadership on. And I would like to give like a brief example from the civil society that I am representing here. The Global Center on AI Governance is a think tank based in South Africa. And I am based in Argentina, in South America. The project that I lead is the Global Index on Responsible AI, which has a lot of particularities, but then one that we really highlight is that it is mainly built by people from the Global South. We partner with 15 organizations around the Global South, and we are more than 160 AI experts around the world, assessing the status of responsible AI around the world. From the Global South, we set the benchmarks, and we are assessing countries all around the world. And so, yes, this first strong idea is to take the initiative. And when I say that with this initiative, we had a Global South approach, I think the second key idea is to bring here a challenge, because what is a Global South approach? As it was mentioned previously, the Global South is heterogeneous. It includes a lot of cultures, economic context, societies, etc. But a key learning from our experience is that this challenge of the heterogeneity of the Global South, majority world, or the word we use, is to create these spaces to, while keeping the difference and the particularities of each of us, to finding these common grounds. And this, we have a lot of things in common, and we must keep them in mind to bring them to the global fora, to the global discussion on AI governance as a block, because even countries at the global north by themselves, they have not the strength or the capacities to deal with these challenges. So it's very important for us to create these spaces of debate, discussion, and act as a bloc. And this is something that we have learned from this big study that we conduct around the world, which is that international cooperation is a cornerstone, it's a very important aspect towards responsible AI. And it's also going to be very important both in the AI governance and also in AI for development area. And to finalize, yes, I would like to also bring something that previous speaker had said, that these new technologies do not operate in a vacuum. They are not isolated. They do not grow up in the middle of nothing. They operate in existing societies, existing global order with inequalities, etc. So solutions must always take into account this context that was previous to this in this technological revolution.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for that perspective. I'm going to go back to the speakers to get their perspectives for 2 minutes each, and also because we're also getting some questions from the audience. I mean, the question right now is in terms of what specific strategies the global south can adopt in order to ensure equitable access to and as well as benefits from AI, but at the same time, what Christina talked about, there's some kind of to bridge that perception gap, but also in terms of the resistance coming in from the global south populations. So let me go back to first His Excellency Ambassador Endemo for his 2-minute perspective. Ambassador.
Sorry, I had blocked myself. Thank you again. I would say infrastructure, and the capacity building, because these are the areas which really hinder the global south from being competitive in this space. But I may add that the regulatory framework is very important, and as one of our participants has said, I think we shouldn't rush into regulation. We should first we should work with sandboxes in the sense that we are able to begin to do some of the things before we bring in regulation, because regulation sometimes are stifling. If we recall that innovation precedes regulation, so AI solution must be. We must be aware that we don't know to what extent we can benefit from it, and it's allowed to play around with it. But there are some areas where we need to move very fast with it. One of the participants talked about where some countries may misuse it. But what I am seeing is that some of what we sought to achieve under the SDGs, AI technology could facilitate achievement of this. But also we need to quickly integrate this into government and be able to improve on productivity that we have seen in several verticals, in agriculture, in healthcare, in education. But we need to have the courage to move forward, collaborate, be able to take advantage of some of the areas that are proven. In agriculture, for example, we have seen proofs where we can confidently leverage AI in terms of improving the productivity. Then in government, we have seen where it has improved on productivity, especially in our government where we have deployed. And now we find that people spend less in terms of dealing with government. Across all sectors, AI would be very critical. But as I've said, and I repeat, we must have the courage to begin to intensively develop capacities, put up the correct infrastructure, avoid taxation of this emerging tech so that it's affordable to everybody, And that's how we can be inclusive with this emerging technology.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Erika?
I think there's really, as someone said, we've all been talking around similar themes here, but at the end of the day, I think it is critically important is that we take measured, thoughtful, and context-specific approach to AI integration and development across the globe, including in the global South. And when I say that, I mean that's also taking that time to really understand the needs, the current state of infrastructure, the current state of the workforce, the current state of education, the current state of the needs of that community before just rushing to deploy the technology without that proper foundation and the guardrails that would be in place. The focus should be on building this ethical and equitable AI system that can truly empower those communities. As we do that, I think we will need to always be thinking about what is the ultimate goal. It is so easy to get that shiny toy syndrome, right? AI, it's cool, and people are rushing to implement it in a number of places, sometimes without truly looking at whether or not the implementation really advances the need or whether it's just different. And if it's just different, it may not be worth implementing at all. If it truly is doing something new and it's making things better for people, then that's where we want to focus. And I think the point that was raised by Christina on the different geopolitical systems is also important to recognize. AI runs on data. So at the end of the day, how is your data structured? Who has access to your data? Just the free flow of data is going to be critical to train these AI models properly, but it also in the wrong hands leads to the ability to potentially empower individuals to use AI for nefarious or other autocratic purposes. So that needs to be thought of as well.
Thank you so much, Erika. I think we only have about 6 minutes to finish the discussion. So on the behalf of the discussants, let me call on Mark first to respond to some of the issues that have been raised. Mark?
I think talking about equity and how the global South will have a very productive participation in terms of digital development. I think representation in global standard setting bodies would be a crucial for from the representatives from the global South, because I think that's really where the rubber hits the road in terms of what norms and values really get baked into these technologies. And when we think about representation, this is not just about a knee-jerk reaction in terms of reskilling and upskilling, but really thinking about reimagining what it meant to be a digital citizen in this emerging society that we live in. And so this is not just about STEM courses, but also encouraging arts and humanities as a holistic approach in raising the next breed of technologists and social scientists. So I think I'll leave it there for other panels to contribute.
Thank you so much, Mark. Christina, if you can just quickly comment on some of these issues.
Yeah, actually, I don't have that much to add. I agree with what has been phrased already very well, that I think that the degree to which global South countries can benefit will also depend a lot on the more advanced nations coming together and making this a cause and really trying to adapt solutions to give access, to help develop both affordable and locally adapted solutions that solve problems. I think others have said it already very well. And on the geopolitical dimension, I do think that there is something on the horizon. Well, it is already there. We've seen the chip wars between United States and China and so on. And what I fear is that we're talking a lot about, benefit, how can the South benefit and so on, that now at a moment where we're at a foundational moment where standards are being set and where the way is paved really in some degrees in many ways to decide for either one or another or the other system. I'm really afraid that the weaker countries that don't have that much of a choice are being caught in the middle and that are forced to either adopt, for example, Chinese technology that is selling systems on, so on, or American for that matter. So I think that is something that we should watch more closely, also from a protective point of view, from a developmental point of view.
Thank you so much, Christina. So I've been asked by the organizers to now actually give the final comments to both the speakers if they have any closing remarks in terms of the issues that we have discussed so far. So let me first call on Erica to give her closing remarks, maybe for 1.5 minutes. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again for letting me be a part of this very important discussion. As we close out, I guess, my parting message to everyone would be to think of AI no differently than any other technology or tool that is out there. It should always be deployed with the end in mind. And all of us, it's incumbent on all of us as we are looking at AI, as we are thinking about development, to make sure that we are using representative voices from different communities, different walks of life, different perspectives, so that when we're training and developing these models, they take into account more than just one specific point of view, but a truly global point of view. And then ensure that we are thinking about how that access can be shared with others across the globe.
Thank you so much, Erica. Ambassador, I think you have the last word.
Thank you once again for this organization. I would actually close by saying that we need to collaborate more to create a balanced relationship between North and South. Look more into investing in education, facilitate knowledge exchange. We do joint ventures and partnership, promote ethical, sustainable practices, which we have been doing globally, building robust infrastructure, then fostering inclusive innovations ecosystem. If we get into adopt this, we can create a synergetic relationship where the global North and the South support each other in terms of growth and development, and ultimately leading to a more balanced and equitable global landscape.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And I think I would actually do a very bad job in terms of summarizing the key takeaways, but I think we have raised some important issues in terms of, from Christina's point about the hedging which is happening geopolitically between the global South and some of the major digital powers, to Mark's point about the community-driven approach, to Erica's point about the fact that we need the context-specific awareness in terms of deployment of AI, to what Siriwa talked about, the importance of the countries, such as China, in also, bringing them to in terms of the AI development, to Nicola's point about in terms of bringing the Latin American perspective also, and also this focus on the community development. I think we have had a very rich discussion in terms of this issue, and I think it's important to keep this conversation going. So thank you so much, both the speakers as well as all the discussants for joining us. For some of them it's early night, or late night or early morning. So thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule and giving your valuable perspectives. And thank you to the organizers for giving us this opportunity. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Samir. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the session on AI and digital tech. How can the Global South benefit equally? Up next in the Global Town Hall is a session titled The Promise of Universality, a North-South debate on how to promote and protect human rights for all. It will begin in just a few minutes, so please stay tuned.
Being born a girl in Africa means navigating a journey marked by many hurdles. Here are 4 challenges that women and girls in Africa face every single day. 1. Period poverty. Millions of girls across the continent do not have access to menstrual hygiene information, products, or even toilets. Those who do have access often cannot afford it. Women in 9 countries across the continent earning minimum wage have to spend 13% of their salaries on sanitary products. 2. FGM. The practice of cutting or removing female genitalia for non-medical reasons affects 200 million women worldwide and is still practiced across the continent. Roughly 44,000 women and girls die each year from this practice. 3. Access to education. Thousands of schools across the continent have closed because of insecurity and conflict, depriving at least 2.5 million children of education, most of them girls. And 4. Gender-based violence.